Hello Booktube. So today I am bringing you my March reading wrap-up. March was a really good month for reading. I got just a heck of a lot of things read, especially compared to February. February, I wasn't reading books so much. I kind of fell into like a book reading slump. I was reading other things, but just not books. And I definitely turned that around in March. So I read a total of 15 things. It was a mix of graphic novels and novels. And I think I read about 4,200 pages, which again, that's like the most pages so far this year I have read. It's a whole like extra 1,000 words more than I read in January, I think. So like I said, really good. But since our 15, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull up my Goodreads list on my phone so that I don't forget any books and jump right in. I also did a fairly good job of reading everything I put on my TBR. I think there was only one book that I missed, and that's because I was reading it as part of a read-along / group, and the group decided to read it in April instead of March. So it's just kind of like a scheduling change. So the first thing I read in March was Radiance by Catherynne M. Valente, continuing my ongoing read everything ever written by Catherynne M. Valente kick. And I gave this book 5 stars. I've done a review on it, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I will put it in the cards. I really loved it. It was a great deco punk sci-fi novel about a filmmaker whose daughter was also a filmmaker, and she disappeared several years prior while she was working on a documentary on Venus, and now it's her father's attempt in many ways to write a screenplay dealing with the last little bit of her life and her disappearance, and him kind of coming to terms with it, and the reader trying to discover what happened to Severnunk before she disappeared, how she disappeared, what happened to her, and everything like that. It's an extremely creative, beautiful story. I highly recommend it if you like somewhat experimental science fiction. The next thing I read was The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. I actually have a physical copy of. So most of the books I read in March were library books, and I don't have them anymore, but I own this. This is a classic American noir written in the late 20s, I believe, about a private detective named Sam Spade living in San Francisco who's hired by a woman who claims she has come there looking for her sister who ran off with a man who the woman is very afraid of, basically. But the entire mystery just kind of unravels from there, and nothing is as it seems, and there's actually a missing statue that's worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a bunch of people are interested in getting their hands on it, and Sam Spade's kind of in the middle of it, while he also really wants the money, because he's a pretty morally ambiguous character for being a private detective. So, I'm not gonna lie, like when I first finished reading this, I was like, wow, this is really good. I've read it before. I read it several years ago for a class, that's why I own it, and I really liked it. And it was also very eye-opening reading it. I was like, wow, this book, which I've only read like once or twice before, and not in many years, really influenced my writing style without me actually realizing. Not that that's bad. I think this is a really good book. I think it's a pretty good mystery. I want to say the movie has Humphrey Bogart in it, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure if I've ever actually read it. So, it's a really famous book. But yeah, so that was kind of eye-opening. And then in the course of reading it, I was like, there are some really interesting side characters who I think would be fascinating to write about. I think I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, and it gave me a lot of food for thought. And originally I was thinking, well, I liked it, but I don't need to hold on to it. And it's been sitting in my unhaul pile all month. But about a week or 2 ago, I was thinking about it again, and I think I have to hold on to this. Like, it's something I could see myself reading again. The next thing I read was a library book, and that was 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I'm currently working through a TBR of books that have been nominated for the BookTube SFF Awards this year. The sequel to this book has been nominated, so of course I had to read the first book. This was the first thing by Leigh Bardugo I've ever read, and I've actually already done a full review of 6 of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I will link up above, and I'll try to remember to link it down below if you're interested in like my more in-depth thoughts. Basically, I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I'm really glad I read it, and I probably should have read it sooner. It was that good. The next thing I read was The Bread We Eat in Dreams by Catherynne M. Valente. So this is a short story collection by Catherynne M. Valente, which runs the gamut between long and short stories, as well as a few poems, mostly dealing with magical realism and fairy tales of one sort or another. Altogether, I believe I gave this book a 4.13 rating. So when I read a short story collection, I rate each individual story separately, and then I do an average rating of all the short stories. And so my average rating was like 4.13. So there were a lot of like 4 and 5 star reads in this. There were a couple of like 3.5 star reads. So not every single short blew me out of the park. And for the most part, I think I slightly enjoyed the first half a little bit more than the second half. But even saying that, there are a couple of longer short stories in the second half that were mind-blowing. This isn't going to be a collection for like everyone. Again, if you like Catherynne Van Valente's writing style, you'll definitely love this, because it has so many elements in it that I see crop up in her other novels. So I've read Radiance, Six Gun Snow White, Deathless, and you can see elements from each of those books crop up in other short stories. The other thing I'll say is that I never felt inspired to read her Fairyland series, which is like her middle grade series, because I just don't read middle grade all that often or ever. But there's a short story from that universe featuring the main character in this collection that blew me away. I loved it. And so I'm now inspired to read the Fairyland books, at least the first one. I would definitely recommend this collection. I would also recommend it if you like reading fairy tale collections, if you like kind of avant-garde fairy tale collections, if you like science fiction fairy tales, because several of those crop up. There's a couple that are even kind of dystopian. So if any of that sounds interesting, I would totally check out this collection. And then after that, I read Crooked Kingdom, also by Leigh Bardugo, and that is the sequel to Six of Crows. Again, I have a full review. I gave this book 5 stars, cried my eyes out. Like the last 10-15% of the book, I was crying so hard I couldn't read the page. I really loved it. I would love it if she wrote another book with at least some of these characters. And then after that, I started Borrow-a-thon. Well, actually, no. Technically, I had like a day or two before Borrow-a-thon started. So I started another book off of my shelf, because I'm trying to read through my shelf. And that was Dead Until Dark by Charlene Harris. I didn't actually finish this book next, but we'll just talk about it now. I gave this book 2 stars. I think that was a little bit generous. So this book is obviously what True Blood, the television show, is based off of. It's the first book in the series, and it's the first one I've ever read. It's in my mind kind of a classic staple of the paranormal romance genre, and that's why I was reading it for research purposes. I don't really like the television show, and I really didn't like this book. Yeah, there was like 2 parts in it where Sookie was pretty kick-ass. You know, she beats some people up in the first part of the novel, and you know, she has a big showdown at the end of the novel, and those scenes were really good. Otherwise, I hated everything. The only reason I didn't give it 1 star is like the writing is competent. It really shows its age too. Like it came out in 2000, but it really feels like a 90s romance novel. There's a sex scene where Sookie loses her virginity and he breaks her hymen, and it's like a big deal, which is just really okay. I hated all the male characters. I hated Sookie's brother so much. I don't remember the television show all that well to comment, but I hate her brother. He is a douchebag, just on so many levels. I don't like Bill. I really don't like her boss, who I feel like might have been one of the characters I was okay with in the television show, but I really hate him in this. All of the men are creepy and rapey, and there is an underlying thread of misogyny from the author that informs like everything in this book. There's a lot of digs at what we might consider early second wave feminism, 90s feminism, and yeah, I'm glad I only paid $1 for this because it's not worth anything else. Yeah, not a fan. I read it, I can mark it off my shelf, and I can sell it back to the bookstore, right? So after that, Borrow-a-thon, I read a whole range of books that were like so much better. Starting with Uprooted, which I've also done a full review for. Well, it's kind of like a full gush of Uprooted, which I gave 5 stars. And you can check that out if you're interested in hearing like 15 minutes of me going on about how much I love this book. I really love the book. That, of course, is sort of a fairy tale, an original fairy tale. That's what I'm going to call it. It's an original fairy tale about a girl who lives in a valley that's protected by a wizard who takes one girl every 10 years to kind of be his cook / housekeeper. And everyone knows that protagonist, whose name is Agnieszka, everyone knows that Agnieszka's best friend, who's beautiful and brave and who's been training to to be selected. Her entire life is going to be selected. Only when the day of the choosing comes, Agnieszka gets taken instead, and just everything comes to a head. A hilarious, fantastic story. And I literally had to go on Book Depository and buy a copy of it, and it's on its way because I need to own it so bad. Then after that, I read Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by Jen Campbell. This is a little cute nonfiction book full of quotes taken from Jen Campbell's time as a bookseller in the UK, as well as this was the American edition, so it also had bonus sections of quotes submitted by American booksellers, and it was really funny. And then after that, I read volumes 3, 4, and 5 of Saga. I think I gave each of these volumes 4 stars. They weren't as good as volumes 1 and 2, but they were good. They were solid. They progressed the story. Yeah, that's really all I can say about them. I also read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is the first book in her Shades of Magic trilogy. The second book, which I'll be reading later this month, has been nominated for the BookTube SFF Awards, so that's why I read this. This was the first book by V.E. Schwab that I had ever read, and it was solid. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it. It wasn't as good as like Six of Crows though, and since I read them so close together, I can't help but compare them because they're kind of similar-ish stories. They feel similar thematically, even if, you know, their plots are a little bit different. And so yeah, I wasn't as invested in the characters as I was in Six of Crows, so that's why I got 4 star, not 5 star. It was good. It was well written. It was a really quick read. It's about a reality where there are 4 different versions of the world. One of those versions has been closed off. 2 of them have magic, and then the third is basically our reality, our London. They all take place in London in the Georgian era, so like 1819, I believe is the date given. And one of the protagonists is from one of the magical versions of London, and he has the special and very rare ability of being able to walk between the different Londons. There's a whole plot in the, not his magical London, but in the other magical London, which is White London. There's a plot to take over his magical London, and he's used as a pawn to try to take over his London without him realizing it. There's also a thief who is non-magical from our non-magical London who comes across him. She actually pickpockets him and of course then gets swept up in his adventure. She wants adventures, so she ends up coming along with him, and it's kind of fun. I mean, I think the second half is definitely a little bit more, it's more action packed, so it's a little bit more interesting, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I liked it. I want to see what happens in the second book. That's why I'm really kind of holding off on forming a really strong opinion, because there's a lot of stuff there was groundwork laid out at the end of the first book. So I want to see where she takes it in the second book before I really strongly decide anything. But yeah, I'll be doing a review after I finished reading the second book. And then after that, I read Descender Volume 1. This was another graphic novel. Sequel to this graphic novel has been nominated, so I had to read this so I could read the second one. This was really cute. It was a really beautiful graphic novel. I really love the art style. It was kind of like a very muted watercolor palette with very bright pops of color. It was really pretty. The story was very cute. Well, I mean, cute's probably the wrong word. The protagonist, though, is like a child robot. He was really adorable and sweet, and I liked it, and it raised a lot of questions at the end that I want to see addressed in the second one, so yeah. I think I gave it 5 stars. The second to last thing I read was Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon Ha Lee. This book has been nominated for the BookTube SFF Awards in the adult category. Going into this book, I gave it 5 stars, and I'm gonna do a full review of it, which, if it's up by the time I upload this, I will link it above. This book, I was a little intimidated by, just because it's like hard science fiction, and sometimes I don't get along well with hard science fiction. Or I don't anymore. I read it more as a kid. This was pretty amazing. It was extremely addictive to read. I won't claim to understand or to follow all of the world building, but I also don't think you're necessarily supposed to. And it felt a little brainwashy while I was reading it. Like, it really sucked you in, but all of those elements are like really good. And I don't think you're supposed to understand every single thing about everything that's happening or everything about this world, because you're really just thrust into the world. It's about a kind of galactic empire called the Hexarchate. Oh, also, I cannot pronounce anything. I will not claim to be able to pronounce any of the names in the book. But anyways, it's about an extremely tyrannical, semi-dystopian future galactic empire that's run on a system of, it's called a calendrical system, like, and it's sort of religion meets structure meets regimented obeisance to a system, that if the citizens believe and act and observe a calendar, the military is able to do all of these exotic things that defy physics, basically. So people are ruled, people are brainwashed, people are programmed to act in certain ways, to follow systems, to support government's ability to continue ruling in exotic ways. Oh God, it's like, it's so hard to describe. But basically, there is a fortress that's been corrupted by heresy, and they are starting to follow, they've decided to, they've broken from the strict calendar and they've made their own calendar, and that's has the potential to upset the balance of the whole system. And so this mathematical genius captain is given the opportunity to lead an assault on the fortress to retake it. And to do this, she is anchored to the consciousness of a dead general who's like the biggest traitor of their empire in existence, but he's a genius, and so he's anchored to her to lead the assault on retaking the fortress. But all of that probably doesn't make any sense, and to some degree it doesn't really make sense when you're reading the book, but also it makes total sense. I don't know, if you like hard science fiction, read it. It's good. And the last thing I read this month, which is actually on my April TBR, but I had a couple days left in March when I made that TBR, and I decided to pick this book up, and that is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. So it's V. Schwab, Victoria Schwab. I'm gonna also film a full review of this book, so if it's live, I will link it. This book is good. I gave it 4 stars. I've been thinking about that rating, whether or not I want to move it down to 3.5 stars. I think my problem with Victoria Schwab is there's, like, writing-wise, there's nothing I can really fault her for. She writes fine. It's not what I would call beautiful. Like, it's not literary, but it's good. It's solid. I just don't get super sucked into her characters or her plot. So this is about a world where violent actions like assaults, murders, mass shootings create monsters. Like, the action creates a monster. And so now the capital city is divided in 2 parts by one side is ruled by like a gangster who people pay to protect them from monsters. And the other side is led by kind of an altruistic task force who's trying to kill monsters, and he uses his adoptive children are actually a type of monster that feeds on sinners, people who have created monsters. So his task force hunts monsters, and then his children, he deploys them to basically knock people off so that they can't create more monsters. And it's about a girl, the daughter of the gangster, who's trying to prove that she is as big and bad as he is, and he should respect her. And then it's also about the youngest son of the opposite factions, the youngest monster in that faction, who just wants to be human. And so it's like, it's good, but I don't think it really picked up till about, not quite the halfway point, but like the 45% mark. Then it picked up, but it's like, it's not hard to read. So it's hard to rate, because it's like, it's really easy to get through. It's entertaining enough. I didn't have to like force myself to read it, but it also took a while to grip me. I do want to read the second one. Don't get me wrong. 4 stars. I think if you like fantasy, light dystopian YA, you should totally read this, because it's a pretty good example, and it's well written. I can't fault it for that. So anyways, this has taken way too long to record. Oh my gosh. But I did read 15 things, so like, I shouldn't be surprised. Anyways, March was a really great reading month. I don't know if I'm going to read quite so many books. I think I'm going to be reading longer books in April. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them down in the comments below, or if you're thinking about picking them up, and I'll see you guys all in my next video. Bye.